This is known as a Murray Track 2 mini bike. This thing would have been sold probably somewhere around the early to mid 90s. And these come originally with a 3.5 horse Tecumseh. Obviously, it looks like that engine's been changed out on this to a 6 horsepower, which, you know, it's almost double the horsepower. So I think that's probably going to be a little bit scary. We'll have to see how that goes. I'm just going to do just a little assessment on this thing and kind of see what it needs and where I need to start. A couple things that I've noticed here is, one, you can see right there, I don't know if you can see it in there, but that exhaust is broken off, so I have to get a muffler for this thing. Then a few other things that I was looking at. This throttle here moves really hard. It doesn't move the way that it should. Something's wrong. I think the issue with it is the way that they got this throttle cable hooked up. That's just not right. You can see that right there, but that's wrong. That's not how it should be hooked up. I'm gonna have to I'll have to go ahead and fix that. That's not right. You look at, I don't know, something seems a little off with this air cleaner too. I like the look of the air cleaner, but I don't know. It's not supposed to move like that. I'm guessing maybe there's something missing here. Let's take a look. No, yep. So right there's a screw missing. So I don't know if the screw is missing or maybe this just doesn't fit the carburetor correctly. I'll have to dig into that a little bit later and see what's going on there. But we'll just forget about that for a moment. Put that back on there. Let's take a look. Look at the gas situation here. I have not really looked at the gas situation. Wow. Yeah, you probably can't see it, but there are all kinds of chunks down in this gas tank. I'm seeing pine needles and other chunks of debris. I'm gonna have to take this gas tank off, drain it, and clean all that crap out of there. Which means I am most likely also gonna have to take this carburetor off and clean that, because the crap that's in that gas tank, most likely some of it has made its way down to that carburetor. I have not taken a look at the oil on this thing yet. Let's see what we got here. I got a fill here, it looks. Okay, here we are. Let's see. See what we got. Well, there's oil in it. Looks like it's where it needs to be. I mean, the oil doesn't look great, but it does have oil in it, and that's a good thing. Definitely have to change that out a little bit later when we get this thing running. Let's take a look. Let's need to check the pull on this thing. How's the compression? Oh, really, it's got pretty good compression on it. That's good. It's a good sign. Engine's free. It's not seized up. Good compression. All right. Well, that's interesting. What is that? It's like some kind of a band brake of some sort. I think that's what they call these. It's a band brake. Let's see if it works. Let's see. It looks like it works. I don't know. I don't see a lot of movement there. I think we'll have to adjust that up a little bit. I'll take a look at that once I go ahead and I'm able to confirm that this thing fires up. I have not checked for spark yet. That's going to be one of the next things on the list, is to see if this thing has spark. Alright, spark plug's right there. It doesn't look that old. I'll pull that out of there in a few here and see if we can see any spark on that. I'll go ahead and see if I can finagle this spark plug out. It's kind of tight. Oh, good deal. Alright. Oh. Out of the way. There's a lot of soot on that. It's not wet. Alright, we're going to see if we got any spark here. Yep, doesn't look like it's got any spark. Let me try something here. 1 second. Try this again. It's got some spark. Yeah, the kill switch is on. So let's turn it back on and you can see that. We do have a spark. That plug could use some changing though. Alright, good deal. Next thing I'm going to do here is remove the gas tank, drain all the gas out of it, and try to get those chunks and the debris out of the bottom of the gas tank. And then I'm going to move on to the carburetor because it's looking pretty nasty. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the carburetor, break it down, and probably throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner. And the more I look at this thing, the more things that I see that are wrong or are missing. I mean, it looks like, you know, the choke is there, but it's not hooked up the way that it needs to be. It looks like all the rods and things are missing. I'm guessing they probably took the governor and stuff apart on this thing. And that's why we're missing kind of all these rods and springs and things. I don't really need them to get it running, but it would be nice if this thing was back proper. I think for the purpose of this, I just want to get this thing so it'll fire up easily, and then I'll go from there. Oh, looks like we'll be adding a new gas line to the parts list. The gas doesn't look terrible. It's a little discolored. It's not horrible, but judging by all the debris in the gas tank, this had to be done. This had to be changed. Still quite a bit of stuff down in there. I'll have to go ahead and try to get that out off camera. This is just some of the debris that came out of the inside of that tank. I had to go outside with the hose and just keep rinsing. And it keeps coming out. I mean, there's a lot of gunk in the bottom of that thing. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning that off camera. And I think when I get back, I'm going to tackle pulling this carburetor off, which is a bit of a cobbled mess. I'm going to take it off, I'll clean it, throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner, make sure it's functioning correctly. There are a lot of levers, choke levers and governor levers missing from this engine, which is okay, it'll still run without it. But I think from my perspective, I just want to clean this, see if I can get it to fire off. While I'm at it, I'm probably going to go ahead and fix that throttle cable, which is a massive cob job. I don't like it. It looks terrible. And then we'll go from there. We're going to see how it goes. I'm going to start digging in. I just finished unbolting the carburetor. It was fairly simple. I found the easiest way to do it was just to unbolt the intake and take the intake and carb off as one piece. It was cobbled on there. There was some like steel wire holding the linkages and stuff together. So I am going to have to figure out a more proper configuration. I really don't like the way this throttle cable's on here, and I think that spring that they have on here is way too tight, so I'll have to change that out as well. When I took off the carburetor, it was easier just to go ahead and remove the chain guard, and I'm glad I did. Look how loose that is. That's crazy. So I think the best way to deal with that, from what I can tell, might be to loosen up the motor mounts and slide this motor forward maybe an inch or so, and that should take the slack out. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping it'll be just as easy as loosening up the motor mount bolts and just sliding the motor forward to take that slack out of the chain. I did go ahead and bring the carburetor over to the bench here. So it is, here was the intake that it was bolted to. Like I said before, it was just easier to kind of unbolt the whole assembly together. Here's the carburetor. Here's like a piece of wire that was holding, attaching it to one of the linkages. So I really am going to have to figure out how this is supposed to be originally set up. Looks like somebody bent that ear up, so we'll have to figure that out as well. I'm going to go ahead and tear this carburetor down and throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm not going to tear it all down on camera, but I do want to take off that bowl and just see what it looks like under there. See if it's that bad. The gas tank was just absolutely disgusting. It was nasty. Let's just see if there's any gunk in the bowl. Actually, it's not that bad. The gas doesn't look great, but not seeing a lot of crap down in that bowl, so that's a very good sign. Float looks okay. Looks like everything's moving the way it should. Yeah. Gasket's not terrible. Take that out. Needle seat looks okay. Still quite a bit of rubbery flexibility on the end of that, so I think that's good. That's great. Alright. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and tear the rest of this down off camera. Throw it in my cleaner, and when we come back, this will be spiffy clean. And I'll still be trying to figure out why they bent this up. I'll be back in a few. I put the carb parts in the ultrasonic cleaner. It's been going about 15 minutes now. Just going to take a look and see how we're looking. Wow, you can't even see it, so I've used bags. I usually put a little bit of Simple Green in there with a little dish liquid diluted, and that thing is so filthy you can't even see it through the solution in the bag. So we're going to let that go a little bit while longer, and then when we pull it out, hopefully it'll be like magic. Just let me give you a quick look of the carburetor after I pulled it out of the ultrasonic cleaner. It turned out pretty good. I didn't run it long. I only ran it about, I think, a half an hour. I think it's good enough. It's good enough for this rig. I'd certainly run it longer and see what it does, but I'm happy with it. It looks near spotless. So I'm confident that this thing will be getting some gas and hopefully run. I did throw the little intake in there too. Not too bad. A little residue still left on it, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was. But I think with this, I'm going to call it a night, and I'll pick back up tomorrow. Getting ready to put the carburetor back on. One thing that I had to do here was this little tab right here, the idle screw, was bent up the other way. I had to bend it back down, straighten it out the best that I could. One thing that I'm noticing here is that I think what they tried to do on this was bypass the governor. The way that kind of a lot of stuff was hooked up, and it was pretty funky. They didn't do it very well. And that created a lot of cobs. The other thing I noticed too has to do with this aftermarket air cleaner that's on here, which I'm really not a fan of, but I'm going to put it back on for now, just because I don't have the right parts to make it proper. So as you can see, the bowl holes are a little bit farther apart on this adapter, so they didn't quite line up with the bowl holes on the carburetor, and I think that's why they hogged them out a little bit. And then also you'll see that there's some air, there's some light in between the adapter and the carburetor, because this is just too big. It's too big for this carburetor, and the carburetor is going to be sucking unfiltered air, which isn't a good thing. As I said, I'm going to go ahead, I'll put it back on here for now until I get a new one in the mail or figure out another alternative. I just want to kind of get this thing going, verify that it runs, and then go from there. I finally modified the air cleaner that was on here enough to actually make it fit properly. I'm really not proud of it, though. I don't like it, but it's going to have to do for now. It makes sense why there was only one screw in it when I got the bike, because the air filter just did not fit. It's not the right size for the carburetor. As you saw before, a lot of the linkages were gone, and the throttle cable was just an absolute mess, the way they hooked it up. They actually attached it directly to the governor, and they're moving the governor arm to move the butterfly on the carburetor. Before I go ahead and bolt on the carburetor and the manifold, I think it's best that I get the slack out of this chain. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to try to loosen up the motor bolts and see if I can slide the motor ahead a little bit to remove this slack, and that will give me a little bit more room to get the manifold bolted back up. And it will also give me a better idea of how the linkages should be set up. While attempting to take the slack out of this chain, I noticed that the chain is awful close to the frame here, and it rubs. So what I have to do, I already unhooked all the motor mount bolts. I don't know if you can see there. It looks like whoever mounted this previously mounted it over to the left too far. There's another slot here, so I have to move the whole motor over and remount it. So currently that's what I'm doing right now. I'm getting ready to move the motor over, put the bolts back in and remount it. Hopefully they'll take care of this chain rub up against the frame. I did end up moving the engine over from where it was mounted in this slot to this slot in order to fix the chain issue. Before, there was no clearance here. The chain was actually rubbing here on the frame. So I think my clearance issue looks pretty good now. When I remounted the engine, it was a good opportunity to fix the hardware. there were a lot of washers missing and lock washers, so it was a good opportunity to kind of get in there and fix that and make that a little bit better so it doesn't loosen up. But yeah, so that worked out pretty good. The chain has been tightened up. I'll go ahead and throw some oil on there, and now finally I think I can get that carburetor mounted on there. Going to get straightened out here is the throttle cable on this and the carburetor setup. I did kind of fabricate a makeshift governor rod here. I don't know how well it's going to work. I just kind of took a best guess to just get it to work and hopefully function and run the way that it should. I guess worst case scenario I could just remove the governor rod, but I prefer not to do that. The old cable on this thing was kinked and frayed and cobbled together, so next step here, I'm going to remove this old one here. I did get the new throttle hooked up here on the handlebar. However, if I go down here, you can see this throttle end, and if you take a look at the engine, this engine was never really set up with a proper set of throttle brackets or proper linkages. So I'm going to have to try to fabricate something that'll work. Not necessarily going to be perfect, but I'll have to fabricate something that'll work. So I can tell you a couple easy things that I'm going to try to do. You can see that this is one of the pieces that's needed to adapt the throttle cable to the linkage to work the carburetor. That center hole right there is too small for the end of this to fit into. If you try to cut this off, this whole thing's going to unravel and going to be junk. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and drill this out to the proper size to allow this to go through and hook it up to the carburetor. There's also one more piece that I have to drill out. This piece right here. This is kind of a homemade bracket that I'm going to try to use to mount that throttle cable to the side of the engine and get a halfway decent angle so it doesn't kink. I did get the throttle cable installed. As you can see, I mean, it does work. I don't like any of this setup, but this is the engine that was on the bike. This is the carburetor setup that was here. So unless I want to change the carburetor and the intake and all the linkages and stuff, which I really don't want to invest that kind of money into it. I just want to get it going and see if it runs and make it functional. But it does work. I don't know long term how long it's going to work. Don't really like the way that this cable here is kind of rubbing on this piece of metal right here. Hoping that I don't get a fray there. I mean, it's okay. It's just not optimal. And now I have to refabricate a governor rod to go from here down to the governor here, because this is really what the throttle works off. So I started that process. You can see over here I started bending it up. A little bit more of a bend to do here. We should be pretty close. This is going to be trial and error. There were a lot of things missing on this bike. I assume somebody probably tried to do an engine transplant on this and just, you know, started with the wrong stuff. And of course I'm continuing that mistake. But we'll see how it goes. I think it will turn out okay. So what I'm talking about is if you take a look at this rod here. So we need to slide it into here and then into the governor. I'll bend that a little bit later, but give you an idea of how I think it's supposed to work. Again, a lot of pieces missing here. I'm just trying to fill in the blanks. The next thing I need to do is replace these old gas lines. They're starting to break down. They're in pretty bad shape. So hopefully I can just kind of slide these out of here. I don't know. It might end up being a little bit more than that. Okay. There's that one. I may end up doing something I don't want to do. An old gas line, old vent line. This vent line doesn't look too bad. So I'm going to go ahead, fish these out, and replace them with some new line here. And I'm sure you don't want to, well, maybe some of you might want to see me struggle through that, but I think it's going to be a little bit of an awkward process, at least with that fuel line down there. So I'll be right back once I fish those out and replace it with some new stuff. The new gas lines have been fished through the case. And I'll tell you, this one right here was a bear. Golly, that was hard to get through there. Just a very small opening where it fishes through the case. And it comes all the way out the other side and hooks up to the carburetor. Obviously, the vent line here is new. That was pretty easy to fish down through. But this other one, that one was tough. Lesson learned. If I would have known it was going to be that hard to fish through there, I probably would have just left the old one on there. I mean, it was not in great shape, but it was still, didn't have any holes or anything on it. Anyways, you know, it's been fished through, ready to go. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is mock up an exhaust for this thing. If you remember earlier, I had shown how the exhaust was broke right off the flange. So I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and weld a piece of pipe to the original flange and get that bolted on there. I'll show you a little bit of what that process is going to look like. This is the exhaust flange that I took off the side of the engine. It looks like whatever exhaust was previously on there has long ago departed. It broke off. This is all that was left. So at least this was left. I can make something out of it. I think for now all I'm going to do is, and I went up to the hardware store, just picked up a piece of pipe. I think I'm just going to weld it on the flange and straight pipe it back. So I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Let's get some light over here. So this is where the old exhaust was. And it was just the flange that was broken off. So I do have the flange. I just picked up a piece of pipe at the hardware store. And I'm just going to straight pipe it back. There's a lot of fancy exhausts out there. You can spend a lot of money on this stuff. It's not really what I'm looking to do. Just looking to get this thing going and have a fun machine for somebody to use. So what I'm thinking is, I've seen exhaust kind of kick out the side. I don't really like that. I think, you know, you can run into issues where someone burns their leg or their arm on that exhaust stuff. I'm probably just going to go ahead and just kind of kick it back under the seat. Later on, if somebody wants to screw a muffler on the end of that, well, they can go ahead and do that. So, I mean, I'm leaving enough there where you can put a muffler on it if you want to. But this will at least get the heat away from the valves and get the exhaust out from underneath the rider. And it's a simple design. It doesn't kick out the side. Nobody's going to get burned on it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and fab something up and get it bolted on there. So I'm going to go ahead and grind this down and start prepping it to weld the new pipe on here so that we have some sort of exhaust. I'm not going to put a muffler on it, but I do want to put a pipe on there to keep the heat away from the engine and the valves and get the exhaust away from the rider. Good enough for a mini bike and a flex core welder. We'll go ahead, get a little paint on this and bolt it up. A little breezy out here today. Gotta kind of spray paint in between the puffs of wind. There we go. Just a little bit of grill paint. Should be good enough. That dry, get that bolted on there. In good shape. The exhaust has been bolted on. Didn't turn out too bad. I'm happy with it. I know there's going to be some armchair welders out there who have plenty to say, but turned out pretty good. Looks pretty good on this mini bike. A little bit of paint and a little bit of grinding, and it looks very presentable. I purposely made the exhaust kind of kick out underneath the seat. I've seen some of them kind of come out the side, but I've always been concerned that someone's leg is going to get burnt on that, or their hand, or anything like this. This is out of the way. It's not going to touch, there's plenty of clearance between the frame, plenty of clearance between this shock here and the seat, and it'll kick the exhaust out the back. Later on, if somebody wants to put a muffler on the back of here, they can. But I think as far as I'm concerned, this is where I'm going to stop on that exhaust. And the next step is going to be to get the gas tank back on here, get some gas in it, and see if we can fire this up. Brakes still need a little adjustment on this thing. Not bad. that's pretty good. It's back together. It's operational and working. I think one last thing I'm going to do before I send this thing down the road is give it a good cleaning.